Okay, folks, we're going to kick off on this lecture here on project management, and we're going to look first, I suppose, at an overall just introduction to the module. So this is what we're going to do today. I suppose what I'm drawing my inspiration from here in terms of kicking us off is Winnie the Pooh. For anybody who is Irish or born in the UK, Winnie the Pooh will be probably a very familiar character from their childhood. He was a bear who lived in the 100-acre wood and had a series of adventures, and one of his friends was Eeyore, and Eeyore was a donkey. Eeyore had a habit of taking things quite casually, but one of the things he often did was to oversee the work of others. So Eeyore was a bit of a project manager, and one of his was a famous phrase: "You see Pooh, you see Piglet, brains first and then hard work. Look at it, that's the way you build a house." So in a lot of ways, Eeyore was the ultimate or the consummate project manager. He encouraged his friends to plan before they did anything. Okay, so if we look at this, we're going to look at projects. We're going to look at IT applications in projects. We're going to look at project management cycle. We're going to look at how that applies particularly to youth work organizations. We're going to look at monitoring evaluation. We're going to look specifically at things like the logical frameworks. We're going to look at Gantt charts. So over the course of the next few sessions, we're going to start with a broad introduction to project management. We're going to look at that broad introduction. We're going to look at the logical framework. We're going to look at funding around youth work and project management, and then we're going to look at project management tools. Okay, so if we look at, I suppose, broad definitions to begin with, within community and youth work, there's a hierarchy. A program is described as a series of projects which is combined to achieve a broad objective or a goal for a program. So you might have multiple projects running at the same time in order to achieve that goal. And then projects are much smaller, more coherent, achievable, specific objectives. So projects would be a smaller scale. Some are quite significant, others are quite limited, but that they would be a single coherent program of work, and that coherent program of work would be made up of a series of tasks or activities. From a project management perspective, the fundamental building block is the activity, which builds up to a project, which builds up then multiple projects build up to a program. Okay, so if we look at the program, the program must speak to an overall objective or a goal, and that's what the program or even the project is looking to achieve. And under that, you will have more specific objectives. So the goal might be made up of 5, it might be made up of 3, it might be made up of 7 specific objectives. Oftentimes, once you move beyond 7, it overcomplicates the achievement of the project. So like an ideal number of specific objectives would be around 5, thereabouts. You don't want to go much more than 5. The important thing about objectives, though, is that they are SMART, and what we mean by SMART is that they are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. So every objective in your project has to have a very clear set of measurable indicators. It needs to be achievable, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be time bound, so that you know within a particular time frame a particular outcome needs to be achieved. Okay, so when you move beyond objectives, you're looking then at the next level is outputs and activities. So when you're looking at your project, the activity is the things that you do, and they're oftentimes described as outputs as well. So in some ways they're the productivity side of your project. So they are the things, the activities, the things that you're doing. And then in order to make those happen, you need inputs and resources, and they can be people, they can be money, they can be other resources that you might have available to you as a youth and community work organisation. So I mean, it could be volunteers, it could be facilities, it could be a whole range of things that need to be input into the project in order to ensure the activities happen, that the activities then lead to the achievement of the objectives, and the objectives then lead to achievement of the goal. Okay, so if you want to subdivide a project down, you can subdivide it into a number of headings. So each project can be broken into sub-projects. So an example might be that you would be looking to open a childcare facility or a youth work facility, and that in order to do that there are a number of sub-projects that need to happen. The opening of the facility might in itself be a project, but that the design might be a project, the construction might be a project, the decoration might be a project. So and the equipping of the facility might be a sub-project in itself. And that's most likely how most projects work, that you need to break it down into constituent parts. And then once you have the sub-projects, what you need to be able to do is allocate to them a certain period of time. How long is it going to take to secure planning? How long is it going to take to design the project? How long is it going to take to implement it? And who is going to be responsible? And then what resources are going to be needed? So all of these, for the purposes of project management, what you need to do is to break the project down into manageable chunks to which you can allocate time, responsibility, and resources. Okay, so the project in effect is like a journey. It's like a journey, and you have to identify your destination. You have to know where you're going. You have to know when you're setting out. You'd have to know who's taking responsibility for moving you along the journey, and you have to know when you have arrived at your destination. And you know, while it might be there might be slight variations as your project moves on, but the destination has to be closely related to your intended destination when you set out on the journey. Within community development projects and within youth work projects, I suppose one of the things that oftentimes people need to think about is how the world will have changed as a result of the project. So what will be different within a community as a result of a youth work facility being opened, or what might be different in the lives of young people when they've completed a program or a project. So I suppose that is important to keep in mind, and we'll deal with that a little bit later or in more detail in the next lecture around values in project management. Okay, so if you look then at, I suppose, programs, which are an amalgamation of projects, the important characteristic around programs is that programs are generally visionary. And what we mean by that is that they have a higher level objective than maybe projects do, and they are very much about creating social change. They're long term. Within the context in which we're working, they're community based, more than likely. Most of the programs that youth work and community work organisations are involved in will be within communities rather than be within the isolation of organisations. Oftentimes programs are multidimensional, and what we mean by that is they might involve education, they might involve mentoring, they might involve advocacy, they might involve training. So there could be a whole range of different, they might involve activities, so there may be a whole range of different skills, a whole range of different dimensions that would be drawn in to the project. And I suppose the other characteristic of development programs and youth work programs more specifically is that they are most likely to be dependent upon and driven by partnership. That is, that you have state actors, you have private sector actors, you have community actors all working together to achieve the outcomes and the vision of the program. Okay, sorry, I'll just go back here. Okay, so this is why, I mean, the complexity that we've just described there is one of the reasons why development projects need to have a clear framework for planning. And the project management cycle, or the project cycle, is, I suppose, one of the most popularly used frameworks, and it came about through the work of an economist with the World Bank, Bohm, in the 1970s. And while we will look at variations in the project cycle, the general design is as it's presented here, that you have an identification phase, preparation phase, appraisal phase, negotiation, implementation, and then supervision and evaluation. Now we will look at variations in that, but effectively it's the same idea. It goes from planning and design to implementation to evaluation. And that's it. Okay. So that's it. That's an introduction to project management.